We are back, people. What is up? How y'all doing? Uh, Dolphins season finally came to an end yesterday after the loss of the Jets. Wouldn't have mattered if they won anyways because of the Broncos absolutely blew out the Chiefs, but the Dolphins put themselves in that situations where they needed someone else to lose. Regardless, didn't matter. Different things came out. Stephen Ross with the report that Grier and McDaniel are staying. Then there's the whole Tyreek Hill drama. Right back to, typical Dolphins stuff. Yesterday that game was obviously disappointing. I guess I wasn't as disappointed out the game as I thought I would be, just because I guess the Broncos went out to such an early lead. So I already kind of accepted that the hope was over anyways. But the Dolphins didn't look good playing wise. I mean, they had a strong first quarter, and then after that, it was rough. The offense was horrible. You saw Snoop, Tyler Huntley, after a great game versus the Browns, play horribly versus the Jets, and that's just kind of the nature of the backup quarterback in the NFL. Sometimes they'll have this standout game, but it's such a volatile thing. it's so up and down that position. And it was really, really bad, pretty much across the board. McDaniel called a bad game. Achane was probably Achane. I think Malik Washington were kind of the bright spots offensively, at least as playmakers. I haven't watched a ton of the film yet. I didn't even do a film breakdown today because I was there's no point. The season's over. I'll probably do some full season film breakdowns on the players. Maybe some highlights on some of the rookies Chop, players that are obviously going to be here next year. Not focusing too much on the guys that will be gone because I do think the Dolphins will look quite a bit different next year. It doesn't matter what. Yeah, I kind of agree. To me, obviously Hill, great player, one of the best receivers in the league. Was one of the best receivers in the league on the Dolphins for years. Was one of the best receivers in the league before that. It's just I feel it's just not worth it anymore. I think that's a big. I don't know how it's going to work with the contract they gave him if they try to get rid of him. Clearly, he didn't want to be here after that. End of the game interview that he gave. It's not I'm the biggest fan of him anyways as a person, so it doesn't really put me in too much bad feeling there. But go punch, get great advisory. I'm done with Hill. Just draft Warren with 13 pick, man. It will save McDaniel's playback. I mean, I'm gonna definitely do. I mean, we'll talk some draft today, but later in the week, I'm gonna do a really start all the draft stuff. So I've started doing videos film breakdowns on NFL draft prospects, and I'm gonna start doing streams. I'm gonna start watching more players, get more of a feel, because now that the season's over, we can really get into draft season. I've watched a decent amount, but I've really only watched most of the guys that they consider first and second rounders, and then some miscellaneous guys here and there. But I still have a lot to get to. I think the main reason we can start with the McDaniel Grier stuff, because I did have some. Hill pulled himself out of the game. I imagine it was because of he just didn't want to risk himself with injury. But yeah, I think it's time to move on. It's really you really only need one of Hill or Waddle because they both have very similar skill sets, and I would rather complement one more with another type of player at receiver. I like what they have in Malik Washington, but Malik Washington isn't your number 2 guy. He should be a number 3 or 4 for you. Waddle should be one of the top guys, and then you need someone that can complement Waddle. Because Waddle obviously has a very similar skill set to Tyreek, but you'd rather keep Waddle because I think he's younger, better for the culture. Some guy you would try to keep around long term. Tyreek's time is coming to an end. He's an older player anyways. I don't think he has much time left. Try to get what you can for him pick wise. Yeah, we do need a bigger body receiver. Find a way to get Milton. Well, I don't think the Patriots would give him to the Dolphins. He did play good yesterday. I'll give him credit because I watched a lot of Milton at Tennessee, and that was by far the best I've ever seen him play. Because at Tennessee, he was literally one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever watched, it was crazy to see that turnaround. But I will say, you need to see a lot more from him in the NFL before people start crowning him, Who is Warren? I assume they're talking about Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Absolutely an absolute beast. He would help in the blocking scheme. He would also be a bigger body weapon. I think he would be in play at 13. Dolphins picking 13 in the draft order. I will go over later in the week, all the guys I think will be in play at 13. I don't know O-line. I know a lot of people are going to want O-line. I don't really like a lot of the O-line class. And at 13, unless I guess like Will Campbell would be in play, but he also might just be gone. Kelvin Banks Jr., if he was there, would for sure be in play, but I expect him to be gone. But after that, like I don't know if any other O linemen are worth it at 13. So we'll see. And obviously, with how free agency plays and everything, things can change. And when you're at the 13th pick, like I've looked at this class, I think so far I only have 13. I have 13 first round grades. And I think a lot of like, if you hear scouts that have talked about it, or like people who know people in the scouting industry, that's about what people have first round grade wise. They have like 12 to 16. And then there will be some quarterbacks get pushed up. So like you're on the edge of like getting a first round graded prospect in this class. But let's talk about Grier and McDaniel, because obviously they're staying. That's what Stephen Ross said. I feel like this is what was becoming very obvious as the season went on, that they were both going to say, especially McDaniel. Them keeping Grier, I know people will have people mad. I honestly, I'm not the biggest Grier hater, but I'm also like, hey, it's time to move on. But I understand why they didn't, because if you look how this team is built, they built themselves where like, if you kind of start over, you have to fully reset. And next year would just be like a throwaway year. If you fired, to me, if you fire Grier, you have to just move on. And that means you would move on from McDaniel. And if you move on from McDaniel, that also means you have to move on from Tua. Like, to me, like if you're going to reset, you should fully reset. And that means next year, like if you move on from them, like you are for guaranteed to be worse, because if you look at like the resources the Dolphins have with like free agency, and like if you look at the QB draft class, I don't think that year is the year to start over. So I understand it from that perspective. And if you look how like they build their contracts, like it looks like, yeah, they were going to stay. Like that's what it felt like, you know? Because next season it was going to be worse no matter what anyways, if you restarted with without him. And I think if you're going to restart, you should restart with everyone. Because they kind of put themselves in that position with how they build the team. And I do think there's problems. Like obviously Grier's had his good moment, like some good decisions, but he's also had his bad decisions. And I just think the bad decisions have outweighed at this point to be like, hey, you've had your time. It's time to move on. But obviously that's not the direction they were going, because they didn't want to do a full-on reset. I think if that were to happen, it would happen after the season, because 2026 looks more like a year where you would be like, okay, it's time to finally move on from everything with this whole situation. But yeah. With the 13th pick, can we make a move up for McMillan? Personally, I mean, I guess you could, but I probably wouldn't make a move up. I don't think the Dolphins are in a position where they can really move. I think they have too many needs to move up. Because if you think about it, like we're going to need safety. You probably, and some of these positions will get filled in free agency, obviously. But you're going to need 2 safeties. You probably need an added corner there as well. You're going to need an off-ball linebacker for sure. Probably re-sign Dodson for depth. You're going to need multiple D tackles. You're probably going to need some depth at edge. You're going to need 2 guards, probably a swing tackle. You probably need a late round running back added to that group. You definitely need a wide tight end, and you're going to, if you get rid of Tyreek, you definitely receiver was already some position you're probably going to have to add anyways. But if Tyreek's gone, then you definitely need to add receiver. And they need backup quarterback as well. Because it's that's not the direction that they were going, and we need to get rid of all 3. 2 was never him. I mean, I'm not saying get rid of all 3. I'm just saying, like, if they're going to start over, like if they're going to get rid of Grier, you have to get rid of, in my opinion, it's just a full-on reset. But that's why they didn't, because if you full-on reset, like next year is going to be worse. Like if you got rid of Tua next year, like there's no one you're going to replace with him that's going to get better. And like it's going to be a year where like you basically are throwing it away. And I've said this, Tua is a good NFL quarterback. He's someone you can win with. I think the problem with this team, obviously there's the injuries. I think the biggest concerns with him is obviously the injury stuff. If that's why you want to move on, that makes sense to me. But if it's who he is as a player, I disagree. But when it comes down to it, how the team is built, I think, is the biggest problem. You need to be able to run the ball more, not being able to, because the Dolphins made the adjustment in their passing game to be able to keep drives going longer. They still need to be able to push the ball down the field, But I think not being able to run the ball hurt their play action game, how they attack down the field a lot. It also hurt their consistency because it kept them forcing to throw screens and short passes because that was basically their running game because they couldn't run the ball at all. So that means like adding guards, adding a wide tight end. I think they need to add like a physical receiver. That's what the offense needs. Defense, I think the defense was like, obviously they were rated pretty high statistically, but I think those stats were misleading. Like there was a lot of games that defense kind of let you down, but I think defense was mostly a talent problem. They were older, but we'll see. Tua's Av, that's it. I mean, I would say he's above average, but because I mean, clearly the team is much worse without Tua. Like it's not even like it just goes from you being a competitive team that compete with anyone to being like one of the bottom 5 teams in the league. Grier's I hope he doesn't bring back Eckenberg. Liam, I mean, if Liam comes back, he better be a backup. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, I've seen a lot of. I'm not saying it's like. I feel like a lot of people have already given up on the next season. I would say it's way too early for all of that. Like I'm not very positive or optimistic going into next year. But there are ways. Like there's still something within the roster that can be worked upon. But it's up to Grier and McDaniel to make an adjustment and get better, which I think is possible. But I'm not going to put too much money on that. Tua stats is. I'm not even talking about Tua stats. I'm talking about his play on the field. I watch film, so I watch a lot of film, and I know Tua's film is what makes him underrated because I think it's a very nuanced thing that the casual fan doesn't really notice a ton of because he doesn't have a lot of like the very obvious traits. I don't agree with that. I think Weaver was actually pretty good this season. I thought this was our most talented roster on paper ever in Dolphins history. I mean, the Dolphins obviously had talent, especially when healthy. They had talent, but they were pretty injured. But there was like where they lacked talent was at pretty big spots that I think hurt the Dolphins a lot on both sides of the ball. Specifically guard. And I think defense, they just like were banged up through the whole year. And then like guys just got attacked throughout games. And some of the guys that were talented played down. Like Javon Holland obviously was a talented player, but just played like a horrible season. And then you were just old at a lot of spots like Jordan Poyer. You're horrible at safety. Even players didn't, I don't think like Ramsey had his best season at corner, that type of thing. Weaver Stevens, yeah. I'm not saying Weaver was perfect, but he definitely wasn't bad. I mean, I said, like our stats were misleading, but like we were still the third highest scoring, like third best scoring defense, which was actually kind of insane to me. But in some big games, yes, they were let down. But I think I mean, watching the film, it was less to do with scheme, in my opinion. Tua good at 2 to 3 things, getting rid of ball short passes. That's it. I mean, he's obviously good at that, but like we've seen in the past that that's just not all he's good at. That's just a narrative that you bought into, Lance. Sorry to break it to you. That's obviously what they did a lot this season, but if you watched in the past seasons, he pushed the ball down the field more than a lot of players, and he's very accurate in anticipation, but he does have limitations to his game. I'm not saying that's not true, but I think the main problem is the concussions. Hill for Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think the Cardinals would do that. Honestly, I don't think we could get that much for Hill, just thinking of his contract, and he's an older player. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. But yeah, that game was rough. Season as a whole. I mean, we could look at the roster as a whole. Players that you're kind of relying into. I feel like at receiver next year, really the only guys right now that you're looking into next year that having is Waddle and Washington. I don't think anyone else is guaranteed to be around. Even, obviously we talked about Tyreek wanting out. Tight end. I think at tight end, Jonnu's the only one guaranteed to be around. I think you need to add some white tight ends. I think they would probably keep one of Julian Naylor Durham. So that'll probably be a fight, but that's for like tight end 3, in my opinion. They should add to that position for sure. Offensive line, Aaron Brewer's going to stay at center. Right tackle will be Austin Jackson when he comes back healthy. Left tackle, depends what Armstead's going to do, but I think it will probably be Patrick Paul because Armstead will most likely be gone, retiring. And they need 2 new guards for sure. Running back, I imagine you're going to have Achane, Jalen Wright. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved on from the veterans, Mostert and Wilson, to save some money. And they need to get younger at the position. And I think they need to add someone who's like a good short yardage guy because that was something that I think held back the offense this year. Yeah. Hold on. Don't know if you said already, but what DB do you think we should be looking to draft? Okay, so I have watched some DBs, and I will say this. I just saw a mock draft actually on Twitter. I believe it was posted by Kyle Krabs, aka Grinding the Tape. He's another Dolphins guy, but he does stuff for 33rd team. He posted a mock draft. I think he had us taking Malachi Starks in the first round, who's the Georgia safety. I think he would be in the play in the first round as well. I don't know if that would be the ideal pick, but it's not a bad one. But there's some safeties I like. I think Starks in the first is not a bad pick because he's versatile, can play multiple different spots. He can be your nickel. He can match up on tight ends man-to-man, come down and play slot. But there's a lot of guys I like. I really like Xavier Watts, the Notre Dame safety. He's like a second-round guy. If you got him in the second round, because he can play middle of the field, and he makes some plays that like are so, like his instincts are so good. I love instinctive players. He's a ball hawk. I think he has like 6 interceptions on the year. He's a player I really like. And then a sneaky player that he's like, if you look at like my first round graded players, which I haven't done everyone yet, but like out of the guys that are like not typically seen as first rounders, there's only one guy I have that's like that, and that's Jahdae Barron from Texas. He's one of my favorite players in this class, Jahdae Barron, Texas. He plays corner for them, but like I've seen he played nickel last year, and he still plays nickel now. He plays nickel, corner, outside corner, both sides. I've seen him play dime linebacker. I've seen him play safety. Like this guy does everything. So I'm a big fan of him. I think he probably goes like late first round if I had to guess, but like if you got him in the second or like maybe in a trade back or even if they took him early, like I would still be a fan of that pick just because his instincts are so good. He can play zone, man. I really like the other Texas safety as well, Andrew Mukuba. He played from Clemson. He's a good player. Corners, I actually think have some good first rounders like Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, who's a corner/receiver who will be gone for sure. Javon Ravel, the Eastern Carolina corner, is good too. Yeah, I don't think he'll go that late though. I think he's played the Mukuba kid. I think he's played good enough to where he's not going to go late round for Texas. He's a good player. But I like Barron. I like those kids, and I haven't watched a lot of the DBs outside of the guys I've mentioned, but there's some names and I've seen some clips of players. I'm like, okay, yeah. Like Maxwell Hurston from, I believe, Kentucky, another name that I've liked for what I've seen so far. Any good/great guard prospects? I think, okay, so for some guys that I like, I think a lot of these players play tackle. So for the guards, like Tyler Booker from Alabama is a guard. He played guard. He's probably the best pure guard in the class from Alabama. Good player, plays with physicality, and I think good enough mover to where like he could be a fit in this scheme. I like him. I don't know where he's going to go. I'm going to guess like he's going to be a first round player, but not a first round grade, if you know what I'm saying. And then a lot of the guys are like tackles. Like I like Marcus Bow from Purdue. He played tackle, but I think he might even be a center. Could potentially play guard. The kid from Missouri, Armand Membao as well. He's another good player that I like. Wyatt Millum from West Virginia played tackle, but I think he's going to be a guard at the next level. Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, another name to keep an eye on. And those are like, then you have like Kelvin Bakes Jr. and Will Campbell, who I think can both play tackle, but also can both play guard. Yeah, Starks at 13, I think, is for sure in play because to me, you're at the end of the first round grades. And when you're at the end of the first round grades, sometimes these players fall that are like, not the position, like their safeties or the running backs. They fall because, or the guards, they fall sometimes because they're not like premium positions. So, and I think Starks could fall and be the best player on the board. So I think that's for sure in play. I think D tackle will be on play at 13 as well. D line for sure. D line is like very strong. Like Kenneth Grant, I think could be in play. Because after Mason Graham, the Michigan D tackle, I think will be gone for sure. And then after that, there's a lot of D tackles that I think will be going sort of in that range from where the Dolphins pick to later, from Kenneth Grant to Derek Harmon to Tyreek Williams, Ohio State, Walter Nolan, Ole Miss. And that's just to name some. Hill trade can be similar to Stephon Diggs trade, possibly. Also could have the same effect. Sometimes you get rid of a good player and it's just what your team needed. Not that because you got more talented, because like clearly the Bills got less talented, but like they stopped putting a focus on Diggs and they started being more balanced offense, and that helped them out. So that same effect could happen for the Dolphins as well. We need a corner. Storm Duck is a backup, not a starter. I agree. Yeah, I don't think you're relying. Personally, I don't think Duck has been, like, he's an undrafted rookie. So I'm not like, he hasn't been perfect or anything. Like he's played pretty like below average, but for an undrafted rookie, yes, he's a depth guy for sure. I still personally think Ethan Bonner was better on his film last year. So I would have liked to see Bonner play at those backup spots. I'm not sure why he didn't, but I guess that's just how practice was going. It's terrible having to keep one of the two, like Ike or Jones, like Smythe. Those four should all be gone. Yeah, that does suck, but you probably will have to keep some of them just because they're cheap, and Dolphins are going to be like, okay, we need some depth. As long as they don't have to like play significant snaps, unless injuries happen. With Grier and McDaniel staying, what changes? I mean, hopefully some changes. I'm guessing, hopefully Crossman. I don't know if they're going to change too much, but I think they did last year though, right? At least, defensively they changed. We'll see. I feel like McDaniel, I wonder if McDaniel will consider giving up play calling, because the problem with McDaniel is he's obviously a very good play designer. Like his play designs are like up there around the league. Like teams steal his play designs. It's just like situational play calling, I think, mixed with doing all the head coaching stuff, has caused him some problems. So if he can get someone that he can rely on to like call the plays and he can still give his input, I think that might help him out a lot. Some people are saying Tyreek leaving is because Matt Dolphin cut Tua before March 14th. That's why Tua was on the bench with Sunlight, not supporting his team even when the score is close. I've seen people say that, but that's just like that's just pure speculation. So I'm not going to put any put too much into that. If Graham and Starks are there, who do you take? I would take Graham. I think D tackle is more important, and I think I really like Starks. I just don't think Starks has played his best this year. And I think Graham is like super disruptive and would have more of an impact on the game, like play to play. But I think Graham will be gone. Jackson Dart should be in play. I think if you get to day 2, he should be in play, but definitely not a round 1 guy. I've seen Dart play. The problem with Dart, like there's some skill there, but the scheme that he runs is like, they do not run an NFL system at all. He is barely asked to do things that NFL quarterbacks do. Like clearly you can see the arm talent and like he can make a lot of nice throws, but they just do a lot of play action and RPO, and there's some problems. I don't really like the QB class, I'll be honest. That's why I'm like, with the contract you gave Tua and this QB class, Tua is your quarterback. Whether you like it or not, he's your quarterback, especially since you're keeping McDaniel. Like, he's your quarterback for the next year. He's probably your quarterback for the next 2 years. You might draft someone in 2026 or maybe even in 2025 as like a second or third round guy or whatever that you're trying to develop. Like, he's going to be your quarterback. I would be surprised if they did cut him before the March thing like people were talking about. If they did that, be surprising, but that means they're kind of throwing away at the year. And I wonder if like Ross was like, hey, I'll give you an extra year, McDaniel. Like, we're going to restart, but you'll get an extra year. But that's the only way I see them doing that. I think McDaniel and Grier know, like, there's not anyone else out there that's giving them a better chance to win. And like, people are playing for their jobs and stuff, Okay, if Genty fell, would you draft him at 13? I think it depends on who else is on the board. I think if he's clearly best player available, I would do it. But I just think the Dolphins have bigger needs than running back. He would probably help though, because Dolphins, if they had like the guard situation figured out, and I was like, well, if we did draft Genty, say we moved Achane to more of a receiver role, that could be intriguing. Because, I mean, to be fair, Achane has honestly kind of been a receiver for you this year. Because you do need someone that could carry the load. If you look at a lot of the best offenses in the league, like they have a very consistent running game and a guy they can rely on, that helps them a lot. So it's not like I would dismiss it, but I'm not like, it wouldn't be my first option. If your guy has gone in the first round, how far would you be willing to go in the first round or just move out altogether? I don't think they would move out of the first round from 13. That would be surprising. I think in this class, I just don't see that happening just because this draft class, I don't see teams wanting to trade up too much for players. McDaniel needs to fire who's ever in. This is the Jimmy Butler's Butler. McDaniel needs to fire who's ever advising him on challenges. I agree. Dude, put me in the booth. I swear to God, I feel like I could do, if there was one job in the NFL that I could do better than what people do in the NFL, it's that job. Who's ever in the booth being like, hey, challenge this or don't challenge this. Because some people make the worst challenges I've ever seen. They're so bad at challenges and timeouts. Like, why is every head coach somehow bad at challenging and using timeouts? It makes no sense to me. But maybe it's different on the field. Dylan Gabriel would be I don't mind Gabriel as a backup, especially if you get him on like day 3. I've also seen like apparently the Wilkins comp pick. I don't think this is guaranteed yet, but from people who understand comp picks, the Wilkins comp pick might now be a 4th rounder instead of 3rd rounder because of the injury, which sucks. Hopefully they get lucky and maybe that's not the case, but that looks like it's going in that direction. Okay. I think Tua is not the problem. I think the biggest problem is that we're counting on very old players. Yeah, I agree. I think the construction of the team was definitely more of the problem than Tua himself. Clearly, the injuries is not what you want, but injuries happen. Tua did just play every game the year before. This year, he did not. And I don't like the discussion of like Tua, like, oh, he was selfish. He put his body on the line. And there's situations where like, if Tua was just like throwing his body every play and, you know, it's a 2nd down, he's diving for no reason, like, the 2 times Tua did it this season, or like the 2 times he got hurt doing it, it was a 3rd down and a 4th down where he thought he needed to get the 1st down. And it's just hard for me to blame him for doing that. As someone who's also very competitive, like, it's hard for me to blame him that way. Obviously, you don't want to get injured, but make Tua gain weight again. Honestly, I don't think the Tua weight gain is the reason he didn't get injured. It's like, oh, it kept him from being hit, you know? Or it kept him from like being injured because he's thicker. I think it was just like, it made him run less. That was why him being fatter made him run less. I don't mind him having a little weight down. He just needs to be like, at this point, like, hey, don't even run for 1st downs. That's it. Like, you can create off script in the pocket, but like only do that. Like, you do it to throw and only run if it's like no one's even within you within like 10 yards or something. I just don't see us cutting to before March 14th. Because you got to think about it from like a GM and coach perspective. If they did that, that means they're thinking they're starting over, but that means like they think that they're safe for a while in their minds. Because they know Tua gives them the best chance to win, and there's no QB that they're going to get this season that would keep their job safe for like the next seasons. And McDaniel very much trusts Tua. Trade for Najee? I'm not a big Najee fan. Like, he's the type I'm looking for, but I just don't really like Najee Harris. Can Grier change his drafting philosophy? I do think it's possible, and I don't think it's just a Grier thing. I think it was McDaniel when he first came here was like, hey, we need to get Tua guys that get open. Because he looked at the team and was like, Tua gets rid of the ball very quickly. He thought like, okay, I think receivers is more important to him than O-line. But I think what they failed to know is like, they don't necessarily need an O-line that can pass block super well, because if you think Tua does get rid of the ball quickly, they do scheme things up really well. So like pass protection usually isn't the problem. Sometimes it is. But for the most part, it's nothing like crazy when you compare it to the rest of the league. The problem with the O-line this year is they couldn't run block, especially once Austin Jackson went down. The only time they ran the ball well is when Tua was out with injury. And like there was that stretch of games where like Austin Jackson was in there and they were running the ball pretty well, like versus the Colts and stuff like that, Patriots. But once Jackson went down, their run game just went horribly. And that's when Tua came back and their passing game started being good again. Or at least mostly good. I think that's the problem. Like they need to find guys that can run block, some road graders. They need, I think, some better running backs who make some better reads. They need a wide tight end that can block. That helps out so much, especially on like outside zone runs where like they're attached to the play on the play side of those runs. Like it helps out tremendously. Like you have some good, some pieces are there. If Austin Jackson when he's healthy, Brewer is a piece as well. We'll see what happens with the other left tackle position with like Paul or Armstead, whoever ends up being. But I think you're fine there. But you really need to just get better at guard. You think Abdul Carter falls to 13? I highly doubt it. I think Carter will be a top 5 pick. Everyone is begging for O-line. Yeah, well, I think you can't like. The big thing about free agency in the draft is like you use free agency to like fill a bunch of like positions and your needs. So you don't put yourself into the hole in the draft where like, oh, I need to draft this position in the first round. If I don't draft this position in the first round, we're screwed, because sometimes that's just how the board falls for you. Sometimes that position you want is just not there and there's a way better player. And I think that's poor draft philosophy to just like force yourself to take a position, because that's how you end up just getting worse players. I think it's just better to draft better players, because down the line, like look at what the Lions did. The Lions just been drafting good players, man, like at positions out of order too. Like they took in that one draft, they took Gibbs at running back in the first round, then took Campbell in the first round, a linebacker, another position that's not premium. They also took Brian Branch, a safety. They took Sam Laporta. Like those are guys those are not premium positions, but they just drafted good players because they were able to fill their other needs and free agency, also other positions in the draft that allowed them to do that. Yeah. I'm getting old. My heart is getting weaker. I actually don't think I can take any more letdown. I feel you, Brian. I feel you. Grier will overcorrect and end up offer. Yeah. I don't know if he'll overcorrect like that. I guess it's possible, but I just don't think the Dolphins are in position to offer $25 million to Trey Smith. Booker and Donovan Jackson, and Dylan Gabriel and Ja'Cory Briggs and Will Shepard. That would be an interesting way to go. I don't know if they'll do that specifically, because I imagine free agency they're going to get someone at guard that can start. So they don't need to go back-to-back guard in the first and second. But because there are other positions to fill. I think it just depends how free agency plays out. Obviously, that changes everything. I just don't think guard is the best choice at 13, just based on the players I'm seeing right now and like thinking how the board's going to play out. So like hopefully you can get some guard, at least one guard in free agency. Maybe you take a guard in the second or something if you can't get 2 starters. Broncos did the same thing with Russell Wilson. They forced him to come out of the game at the end of the season. Moved. Yeah, I've seen people try to compare it to that. I just think it's slightly different situations because, I mean, Russ was like clearly bad for them. And like they weren't really winning much with him, but yeah, they had definitely got better with Bo Nix being a scheme fit for them. Yeah, Dolphins have so many holes. That's why I'm just like best player available, anyways. If you can get good vet QB or for QB2, why not draft a raw QB prospect that take 3 to 4 years to develop like Jalen Milroe? Well, it depends where you would get Milroe, I think for sure, because I would definitely not take him. If you're talking first round, no, thank you. Day 2, like I understand when you start thinking about it. I think the reason the coaches might not think that way is because they don't think they have that long, and they're like, hey, we need to get players that are going to make an impact now. If you're thinking about it from the GM and coach perspective. But maybe they go in that direction. I just think they would probably wait until maybe 2026 just because it makes more sense for that class, because I don't really like the 2025 class personally. Did you say we need better running backs? We need a power. Yeah, if I said better running backs, I don't mean like we just need like Achan is there obviously, Jalen Wright is there obviously. I think it's time to move on from the vets like Wilson and Mostert, and then you get someone who can play with a little more power, someone who can be a little more of a short yardage back. I know people like Cam Scatabo from Arizona State. That would be an intriguing fit with what they have. But I also wouldn't mind taking someone that could potentially be your starter that gets like a lot of touches, and then Achan does like receiving work a lot, because Achan obviously a very good receiver. He doesn't need to be like your workhorse back. He can be a guy that gets a lot of like high value touches. Make a move for Cousins, let Tua and him compete. Well, yeah, I wouldn't mind bringing in Cousins. I don't think they would compete. I think personally, from what I've saw from Cousins this year, he looked pretty washed. So I don't know if they want to go in that direction. Like, he just looked like that Achilles injury. Maybe the Achilles just came back from it too soon. It was, I guess, his first year off of it, but he just looked pretty gone. I'm taking Hufanga. Yeah, Hufanga is not a bad shout on free agency, especially if you get him for a fairly cheap contract. What about Stevenson from New England? He's a good player, but he has a very like big fumbling problem. Like he's fumbled a lot this season. I think he's gotten benched for like 3 games this season for fumbling. But I do think like outside of fumbling, he's a good player. Draft, coaching, and organizational change are always a topic on day after season. What are the questions often not asked that are central to making the team better? Draft, coaching, and organizational change. I mean, I guess it would come down to maybe culture, having players that are bought in. But I mean, all those things kind of, I just feel like draft, coaching, and like all kind of tie into that, I guess, at the same time. I guess it's tough to answer that, because all those things you mentioned also lead in all to the little other things that are kind of a part of the roster. Ollie Gordon, yeah. Gordon, day 3 is not a bad one. Oklahoma State. I watched him last year. I haven't watched him this year, so we'll see about him. But he is that type that I think you're looking for. Yeah, I mean, if Cousins came cheap, because Cousins, if he gets cut, will be like he doesn't need to get a lot of money. It'll be similar to the Russell Wilson situation. But I would be surprised if it would push Tua for sure, but I would be very surprised if he like started over Tua, especially with how he played this season. But it's not the worst shot in the world, especially if he comes out like basically that Russell Wilson deal where like Russ is still getting paid from the Broncos, but he signed for like almost a vet minimum with the Steelers. Yep. Let's see. I don't think I ever finished talking about the defense. Yeah, rest of the defense. So I'm just gonna go down like the list here. Calais Campbell. Shout out to you, Calais. I don't think you're gonna come back. I'm guessing this will probably be your last season, but you were one of the best players on the team. You were a great leader. Culture shift. Dolphins needed to find some way to replace him, player-wise. So D-tackle will be a big need this offseason, especially because then Benito Jones and Deshaun Hand are both free agents. I do think they'll try to bring back at least one of them, potentially both, to be depth. But the Dolphins are going to need a new starter most likely. Zach Sealer will be back. Sealer stud. Another great season for Zach. The D-line room as whole, I think, played pretty well. Dolphins kind of started the season slow, stopping the run. But for the full year, they stopped the run pretty well. They stepped up. D-line room overall, probably your best unit, I would say. Calais, Sealer, dominant. Jones and Hand played pretty solid depth-wise. So shout out to them as a unit. Chop Robinson, probably the biggest bright spot. I would say the biggest positive bright spot future-wise, if you look at the team, is probably Chop Robinson. Like, he started the season a bit slow as well, but really turned it on. Was your best consistent winner in one-on-one pass rush situations. I think getting Phillips back next year healthy, because now Phillips will be 2 years off the Achilles. He obviously had that, I think it was a slight tear in his ACL, so hopefully that won't affect him long-term going into next year. So hopefully Phillips can be fully healthy, because him and Chop would be a disgusting duo. You really do need like 2 edge rushers to really like. I think that can really elevate your defense as a whole. And then obviously you would still have Sealer in the middle. I think that would still be most likely, as long as you stay healthy, a strength of your team next year is your front. But yeah, Chop really, really, I think one of the definite bright spots. And then I think the rest of like sort of the edge position, I think Ogba, for what you brought him in as, Ogba had a pretty solid season. He's not someone I think you should rely upon as a starter though, personally, because a lot of like his impact plays were not really like, they were more like schemed up pressures and sacks that he got throughout the season. I think he only had like one real win as a sack, and that was last week versus the Browns. But I don't think like he was a negative for the team for the most part. Quentin Bell, I think, was a surprise. I would like to bring Bell back as a depth guy. I thought Bell was pretty intriguing with his skill set. Didn't really get to see Kamara play the season. Mo Kamara, hopefully he can develop, but that's just sometimes how it goes when you with 5th round rookies. Sometimes it takes a little bit to for players to develop. Don't want to give up on guys too quick. That's something I feel like sometimes people do. They just give up on people instantly. Linebacker Jordan Brooks, one of the best players on the team this season, was absolutely phenomenal. I remember Seahawks fans being like, "Oh, he sucks in coverage," and I watched the film like he's better in coverage than he is versus the run. And then he was good in coverage this season. He was good versus the run. He's a good blitzer, very athletic guy. Wouldn't mind getting just another stud next to him, because I think how some of the best defenses in the leagues, it's very hard to find 2 good off-ball linebackers, and that's something not a lot of defenses have. And when a lot of the best defenses over the years usually have 2 studs, if you can get a stud next to him, like that's why I don't mind the idea of like a Campbell from Alabama in the draft, just because it's hard to find 2 athletes that can play coverage and versus the run at the linebacker position. The rest of the team, Tyrell Dotson did make some good plays in recent weeks. I would bring him back, but as your 3rd guy. He did lead your team in interceptions, and Dodson got signed. And I liked him from Seattle. I just don't think he's a guy I would want to rely on as a full season starter, just because I think he has some inconsistencies versus the run. Anthony Walker Jr., good leader, good vet. Wouldn't mind bringing him back as a depth guy, but I would probably move on from that. The rest of the room, Duke Riley, Channing Tindall, it's time to move on and start over at that spot. Let's see. I'll get to the DBs in a sec. Let me see what else you guys were saying. Hey, Watch Holland doesn't get resigned. He will have a Pro Bowl season for someone else. It wouldn't surprise me if he went somewhere else and succeeded, because I still think he's a talented player, but he was horrible this season. I may be overthinking, but is Jalen Wright possibly lacking vision? If so, is that something that can improve? It is something that I think can get better, but it is usually more of like a natural thing. But it also could be a schematic thing. There was times where like he had some poor reads, I think, even last night and throughout the season. But I also think it's just a blocking thing. I think the blocking has just been poor for the most part, and sometimes he's missed his read. But like when you don't have when you're not consistently getting touches, when you're only getting like 3 touches a game, it's hard to build up like that feel for it. Sometimes you need a feel to get going, and when you only have like a few reps, you're like, oh, I have to make the most of it, and you try to overdo some stuff. So I'm not concerned yet. It's still very early. Jordan Brooks balled out. Yep. Clayus. Yep. My problem with Tua is every big game he's hurt. Well, I wouldn't say every big game, but yeah, he definitely would like to see him stay healthy. Feels like we need to draft or sign an edge and stuff, so you can't rely on Phillips to be healthy as an effect. You definitely need to get an edge, but I don't think it's like super priority position. My opinion. Okay, I actually have an opinion about this, Scott. You said you don't like how he schemed up Chop. I do agree. I would like to see Chop schemed up more, but I think the reason for this was actually pretty understandable, because to use a guy at edge and play him on the interior, you need someone on the edge that can win consistently then. Because your best, outside of Chop, your best pass rushers were both your D tackles. So that means you were going to have to move Chop inside and then either put your D tackle outside or take one of them off the field. So I think it really was like, okay, we have to have someone on the outside that could win, which was Chop. No one else could win one-on-one on the outside except Chop. And then on the inside, we'll have Sealer and Campbell work on their stunts, and then they can create pressure on the interior. So I think I'll have complaints if they have Phillips and Chop next year, and then if they don't have Chop doing more of that inside stuff, or even Phillips, then I would have a problem for it. But I think it makes sense. Like, hey, we only had one guy that could win on the outside, and was Chop. And I think they understood like we weren't able to use him on the inside as much as we wanted in those obvious passing situations. Oh yeah, Brooks to Baker. Yeah, that definitely agree with that. Sorry, I'm missing some stuff. Will Tedman Billy make it to pick 13? I highly doubt it, Randy. Not impossible, but I would be surprised. Do a mock draft right now, please. I feel I'm definitely going to do a lot of mock drafts as we get there. I just feel like I don't know. I would only be able to do like the first 2 rounds, you know? I don't know enough players to do like a full-on mock draft. Why didn't Mikey trade Clay for a 5th? Did he honestly think he had a chance at assess? Probably because he wanted to keep. These people are like doing it for their jobs, you know. He thinks if he gets rid of Calais, like he gets rid of a good player, that means we're giving up on the season. And he thinks he might get fired if that happens. The rhythm of McDaniel's play calling appears to be off. Do you see that on the tape? Certain games, for sure. Not every game. I think there was a stretch where he was doing a pretty good job, but there are games, especially on the road, where that happens. Deion Walker replaced Campbell at D-tackle. Yeah, Deion Walker, clearly very, very talented, but I do have some questions. He's such a hard player to evaluate, especially when you don't get to interview. Like, obviously, like, scouts get to interview and, like, GMs get to interview these players. He's such a tough one because he has some very good reps, but then he has reps where, like, he just takes, like, plays off and shows little effort. So that's where I'm like, man, I don't know what the problem is there. Do you see Ramsey's post? No, did he say something? Was it Twitter? Do I need to check Twitter? I haven't checked since I've gone live. Does Ramsey want out too? I don't know what. Or is it a? Nah, he didn't post on Twitter or anything, so I'm guessing it's on Instagram, which I don't have Instagram on this. No, I didn't see what he posted. Tell me what he said because I can't find it. Okay, let's see. Okay. A violinist played for 45 minutes in the New York subway. A handful of people stopped, a couple clapped, and the violinist raised about $30 in tips. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the best musicians in the world in that subway. Joshua played one of the most intricate pieces ever written with a violin worth $3.5 million. Okay. 2 days before he played in the subway, Joshua Bell sold out Boston Theater, and the seats averaged about $100. The experiment proved that the extraordinary in an ordinary environment doesn't not shine and is so often overlooked and undervalued. There are brilliant, talented people everywhere who aren't receiving the recognition and reward they deserve. But once they are themselves with the value and confidence to remove themselves from an environment that isn't serving them, they thrive and grow. Your gut is telling you something. Listen to it. If it's telling you where you are isn't enough, go where you're appreciated, valued, know your worth. Okay, so I get what's going on here. He's saying he wasn't used to like his full value. Yeah, that's the whole gist of it, or potentially what he means, like, hey, we need to. I mean, hey, I do agree that they could have potentially. I mean, but Ramsey did not play as well as he could have to. Like, there's sometimes you need to, like, he was left 1-on-1 a lot of times, and he was not playing up to his best. But the thing with these, man, they just gave Ramsey and Tyreek Hill contract extensions, and like, there's going to be dead cap when you trade them. So that was a thing Ramsey posted that I was reading. So he's basically saying like, yeah, basically what I just said. you think McDaniel actually scripts the first number of plays? Yeah, I do. I think just sometimes, like, when I think he scripts it, and then sometimes one of the plays goes terribly wrong, and he's like, well, I have to throw a screen now because I can't trust Huntley. Like, I know people get mad about the screen things, but it's like, dude, you have Huntley in there who can't complete a pass past 5 yards in that game. It's like, yeah, I understand why he's throwing a screen on 3rd and 14. He couldn't gain yards anyways. But yeah. I'm telling, I wouldn't say, like, I'm not as positive, like, I'm not like super sold on Weaver, but I think you're being definitely too negative on him as well. Like, I'm not against bringing in Salah, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's a vague post after the end of the season. I'm not going to put too much stock into it, but it is definitely something to take notice of. But they have done that in the past. Like, to be fair, Tyreek and Ramsey, they both come from other teams where they got traded away because they asked to be traded away because things didn't work out. Sometimes you're going to have players like that, and you take the chance because they're very talented, like Ramsey, like Tyreek Hill. And now it's not working out here, so then they want to be traded away again, potentially. Not saying that for sure, but that's kind of how it works. And they'll probably, at some point, at their new team, they'll be happy, and then at some point, if they don't win it all, they'll probably have to be traded away again or retire. You know? Yeah, I'm not going to put... I think, Tyreek was pretty direct. The Ramsey one, I think, is just not super... Like, it's not necessarily him throwing, like, the coaching or, like, where he's at under the bus. It's almost just being, like, how the team played this season. He didn't get a chance to show his full, potential. That could also be read like that. When drafting, more focus needs to be looking at the floor instead of just looking at the ceiling. Hey, I'm a big floor person, so I don't necessarily disagree, Rob. Look at Tyreek Hill profile picture. Oh, God. What is the cheetah up to now? That's actually pretty funny. Tyreek Hill has his head photoshopped on Antonio Brown when he left the stadium for the Jets game. God, this team, man. Honestly, though, I feel like I saw a lot of people mad on Dolphins Twitter last night, and I get it. I understand why they're mad. But honestly, I just find it at this point, I just find it all funny. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. All I can do is laugh. I'm just going to try to watch draft prospects, find draft prospects I like, guys I would like to see. We can talk the draft. We're in draft season now. And I will be I'll be doing drafts videos pretty much every week. I'll be starting to stream, and we can talk about positions, stuff like that. Different specific players. And then once I've watched even more, I'm going to start like showing grades, maybe even have some scouting reports on players. But yeah. Right, or is another rebuild inevitable? To be fair, a rebuild is always inevitable, unless you're like Andy Reid. Did he announce another baby? Tyreek Hill, more kids than touchdowns. As a Miami Dolphins fan, I gotta do what's best for me. I'm out. True, yeah. If you gotta do what's best for you as a Dolphins fan, and that's take care of your mental health, I gotta respect it. No, I wouldn't. No, not Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson might be my final straw if that ended up happening, even for peanuts. But yeah, I didn't finish the secondary, so let me finish the secondary. And there's probably even people on injured reserve I should talk about too that we didn't, but like Kendall Fuller. I wonder if Kendall Fuller will be back because I know he has another year on his contract, but I wonder if they save money cutting him. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. And it wasn't like Fuller was bad this season, but I don't think he was necessarily good either. Honestly, your best corner was probably Kader Kohu. At least for like the ending stretch, it feels like. Like you have some guys you can develop in Storm Duck, Ethan Bonner. Safety, you're screwed. Jordan Poyer and Holland were just bad this season. Poyer's gone for sure. I think Campbell's a free agent. I wouldn't mind bringing back Campbell because he's a good special teams player, good depth, whatever. But you need 2 new starters at safety. I don't think you can afford Holland for what he's going to get, and I don't think he deserves it for how he played this season. Patrick McMorris, God, I wish they would have let him play. I really wanted to see what you had out of him, you know? But so you can't, like, now you don't know, like, if you can go into the season trying to rely on him for much. Do you believe Miami's issues can be addressed in one offseason? I think there's definitely a way. You can teams. I've seen teams go from the worst in the league to instantly becoming, a playoff contender. I do feel like you can flip your team around in one season. It's not like the Dolphins are that like they were, one win away potentially. If they won the Jets game, they were like very close to getting into the playoffs. It's not like they were super far off, even though it felt like it throughout the season. It does feel like there are holes to fill. I don't think they'll fill every hole completely that they need to, but I do feel like they can still make themselves competitive for sure. It wouldn't be that crazy. What do you think about grading the players individually this year in a couple of videos? Yeah, I'm definitely going to do like film breakdowns on a lot of these players. Like I'm going to do like full season film breakdowns, especially guys who I think are going to stick around. And then I'll definitely grade their seasons throughout the video and like talk about them. And then maybe there's guys that are like free agents. I'll do videos on them and be like, oh, do I think we should resign them or not resign them based on how they played and what they should bring. Yeah, I just read what Jalen Ramsey said on his yeah. I wouldn't put too much stock into it yet, but you never know, being cryptic. But it is definitely something to take notice of. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Honestly, Tua is not the answer. But like, I understand having concerns with his injuries, but like, there's like the best team in the NFC is the Lions, right? If you build your team correctly, the right way, you put like I personally think Tua is a better player than Jared Goff. I don't think Goff's bad either. I want to say, I think Goff is just in the best position in the NFL, and they're a very good team. Like, there's ways to build your team still around. Now, if you can upgrade and get a franchise quarterback, those one of the elite top 5 guys, then that's what you try to go for. But in my opinion, there's not really that guy around, especially this year. It's very difficult to find those. So unless you find yourself in a position where you can get one of those, I don't see how you could really move on unless you like are completely giving up, which clearly the Dolphins aren't. They're keeping everyone around. To be fair, the Dolphins aren't the worst team in the NFL. Without Tua, they might be the worst team in the NFL. I mean, at least that's what it looked like. No, Goff has already been to a Super Bowl. Yeah, because it's a team sport, though. Like, personally, I think as a player, if you put, switch positions, switch where they play, switch, not positions, they're the teams that they're on with the players around them. I personally, when I watch them, they have very similar strengths and weaknesses, actually. I don't think because one's been to the Super Bowl that automatically makes them better than the other one, Is Goff better than which quarterback? Who's a top quarterback that hasn't been in the Super Bowl? Is Goff better than Josh Allen? No. He's not even close to Josh Allen. Gunnar Helm on day 3. I love Gunnar Helm, but I think he's a day 2 pick. He can be perfect like the Lions, yeah. But like even like the Lions competed with the Vikings last night. Do you guys think the Vikings are what? They lost 3 games? They had Sam Darnold as their starting QB. And Darnold played horrible last night, but they are still 14-3 or whatever it was, Yeah, Goff's not better than Lamar either. Not even close to being better than Lamar. And I'm not saying like you don't need the perfect team, but like there's certain ways to build your team around the NFL. Yeah. Yeah, true. The Rams were like move on. I mean, that worked out both for the Rams and the Lions. Sometimes it works out for both teams, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Hey, I totally understand the injury concerns. I understand why people would want to move on from that. It's just we're not in the position this year to do that. Because it's going to, if they do it this year, if they were to move on from this year, trust me, it's going to get worse. Next year would be much worse than this season. It would be just you. It would be them giving up on the season. Like there's no one out there that would be an upgrade. I see. I don't think Sam Darnold's even close to Tua, personally. I think Sam Darnold is also very limited. He's only good off the play action game. When he plays true drop back, they look horrible. But yes, it's just the situation we're in, you know, like if there was a way, any way I could see where like, oh, you could upgrade it, then yeah, I would consider it. But it's this year, I don't see that happening, you know? It's tough spot to be in, but that's just the spot they're in right now. And it's not the worst, to be fair, it's not the worst. There's teams in much worse positions than the Dolphins. There's also teams in much better positions than the Dolphins. But it's very early. We'll see how they handle free agency, how they handle the draft. Maybe they get lucky, but yeah, I think we're talking about like the Vikings, like if the Vikings are still a very, like if they didn't have Sam Darnold like last year, we saw the Vikings with like Josh Dobbs and stuff. They were still a competitive team. The Vikings are a well-built team. If they had JJ McCarthy, I think their first round pick this year who didn't get hurt, I still think they'd be in the exact same position. I think they do a very good job over there adapting. And they were still like a very solid competitive team, pretty much regardless of their quarterback. And their defense plays really well. We saw what the Dolphins look like when their QB goes down. It's literally horrible. What do you think about hiring Doug Peterson for OC and play calling? I don't know. I feel like, you know, he's been kind of got like the image I had of Peterson got tainted by his time with the Jaguars, you know. Forget the other teams. You really like this product? No, I've talked about this. The product needs to be improved, but I'm just saying like the product could be much worse. Like it definitely can be better. And I'm not saying to settle. I'm saying it's different than just like, I feel like people will point to one thing, you know, with the product and they think the product is just the quarterback. And if you can improve at the quarterback position, that product, then that's what you do. But I don't think the Dolphins are in the position to improve at that position. So what my ideas would be to improve at the other spots to make your team better, at guard, at, you know, certain defensive positions. But yeah. See, I don't agree with. Yeah, not saying Tua doesn't have limitations, because he does. There are certain limitations to his game. He doesn't have the strongest arm. You're saying noodle arm, whatever. It's disrespectful, but whatever. Because this year they definitely threw underneath a lot, and I think that had a lot to do with the O-line. They couldn't run the ball. But we saw in the past, like in 2022 and 2023, they pushed down the ball as much as anyone in the league. They threw down the field a lot. So we know they're capable of throwing the ball down the field. Tua specifically, he's actually one of the better deep ball downfield passers when he can play on time. But yeah. I don't know. And it's always tough to talk about like the coaching and like GMs, because yes, you can learn stuff from on the film, but like if I'm not in the room, I feel like we're just doing speculating, you know, like it's very hard to know how they actually are as people, or like what was actually said because we're not in the room. That's why I try not to, like, when it comes to that stuff, to like judge too harshly or act like I know. Like, I might have an understanding, but I don't act like I 100% know because I'm really not in the room, you know? That's what it bothers me, because people act like they know for sure what's going on. I'm like, we don't really know. Tua led the league in yard per average and deep balls 2 years ago. How is there still a noodle argument? Because now he's throwing screens, so he's back to being noodle arm. Because apparently he can't do that anymore. No, clearly he's still a very capable downfield passer. It's just they went away from that from a scheme perspective, but they can easily get back to that. It's just, I think, adding offensive line, a more balanced attack. I think the running game is really what held back the Dolphins specifically this year offensively. He threw a pick six against the Bills because he didn't have the arm strength to throw out of bounds. Yeah, he definitely doesn't have like a strong arm, but that, like, people think just because you don't have a strong arm, you can't push the ball down the field. But he, like, yeah, when he's off script and he's trying to like throw with pure arm, yeah, it's gonna float like that, and that was definitely a bad play. But people act like he can't throw the ball down the field and complete these big passes over the middle, which he does all the time because he has insane anticipation and accuracy. That's how he makes up for his lack of arm strength and has a high yards per average. There's a lot of guys who don't have the strongest arm that are actually good down the field passers. It's just he has to be on like time with it, which is where the limitations kind of come from. But, you know, these things are complex and people like to, you know, make things very simple when they're not, you know? Fix the O-line and good things will come. Yeah, I definitely think that's the direction that needs to happen for sure, regardless of what happens with other positions. Yeah, Dolphins face more cover two than anyone. That's why if you can't run, and the Dolphins can run the ball versus cover two, which is insane, as it means there's a less people in the box. Marino had the best arm of all time. Everyone, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think arm strength in general is probably the most overrated QB trait. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but like, I don't think you need to have the strongest arm to be great at the position, you know? The limitation is that Tua can't extend plays without getting carted off the field. Well, he can extend plays. It's just he needs to not extend plays with his with actually running. Like, he extended plays this year and actually had the highest. There was I don't know if he finished the season, but he had the highest like EPA off script, like throwing the ball. So that was like a good thing. But yes, he did definitely get hurt a couple of times when he was trying to extend the play and dive forward. 2022 year, he had a top 15 O-line. Connor Williams ranked 1. Robert Hunt worth $120 million. Teron Armstead. Yeah, in 2022, he also led the league in yard per average. That's what I'm saying. If you had an offensive line, you can go back to throwing the ball down the field, and then you actually can run the ball successfully. And then the difference now is they have players like Jonnu Smith, so they can still work intermediate and underneath. That was like the problem with Tua's game in the past, is he didn't throw the ball underneath or take his checkdowns. Now he's starting to take underneath and checkdowns, but they don't have the situation around him for him to push down the ball down the field consistently. That's the problem, is they need to find the balance between these seasons, you know? This season, they were too much underneath short stuff, but I think the reason for that is because they couldn't run the ball. The years before, it was like, oh, we didn't have any underneath intermediate threats to take advantage of it, like Jonnu Smith. We could only push the ball down the field, and they relied too much on the timing and anticipation stuff. But in 2024, they went away from that. I think they need to find that balance where they can still push the ball down the field. They could still run the ball. They need some more, you know, interior stuff. But if they can, basically, I think if they can get back to what they had in 2022 and 2023, combined with having the Jonnu Smith threat underneath, that is like what they've been missing, is they haven't had those things combined. You think AR is out in Indy? Mike can fix AR? Hey, You guys said don't get injured players. Anthony Richardson has missed like more than half of the games in his career. He's more injury prone than Tua. So pretty sure he's missed like 17 of 33 games, something like that. But who knows? It's very early in the offseason. So much can change. It's very complex. I feel like, it's hard to discuss it over a chat, obviously. Because, you can't get every single detail, but it's more complex than just being like one person, one position. Yeah, injury luck plays into it too. It's not like they are purposely, like last year, like 2023, Tua was like the only person that stayed healthy, and he was like your injury prone guy, and he was like the only one that stayed healthy. And then this year he missed 6 games. Probably didn't need to miss 6 games, but they played it safe, obviously. But and then you still had injuries this year everywhere else. Maybe not as much as the previous year, but you still had, I think, like third most guys on IR or something like that. No, I feel you, Brian. I mean, I'm not against it, like if it was cheap or something. I even said like the whole Bryce Young thing. Remember when people were like, "Oh, what did they trade Bryce Young?" I'd be like, "Yeah, throw a pick at it." And then people were like, "No, don't do that." And now Bryce Young is balling out. Obviously, they weren't going to trade him anyways. But that's like sometimes these young guys, people give up on them too quickly. I don't mind taking a swing at him if you can get them for fairly cheap. I'm happy to get rid of Hill. Go grab a big body receiver. Yeah, if that's the direction they're going, I don't think it's... Obviously, Tyreek Hill is very talented, one of the best receivers in the league. I don't think it would be that huge because Waddle, if there's one player that can really like sort of replace that sort of skill set, it's Waddle. And if you get Waddle, someone next to Waddle that like complements his skill set, because Waddle and Tyreek are very similar players. Now I think you're at the point where it's like, okay, let's try to complement these skill set. We already have some all smaller guys anyways in like Malik Washington. Let's get a guy who's bigger body, doesn't need, I don't know, just someone that complements that skill set that can be like, a reliable possession guy, while Waddle can be your field stretcher type player, If Tua gets another concussion with fingers turned, should he retire? What are your thoughts? I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. Obviously, I would think it'd be something he would have to consider, but I don't know. I try not to speculate too much on the injury stuff because I really have no idea what... like, I feel like fans have too many opinions about the injury stuff, unless like they're like have some medical experience. I really have no idea what the problem is. Have you seen B. Carter or H. Perkins at linebacker? Perkins is returning to LSU. I know that. B. Carter. Are you talking about... Hold on, let me see. Did I read it wrong? B. Carter. Filters. Go to linebacker real quick. Oh, you're talking about Carter from Clemson. Yeah. I watched him last year, actually, because I thought he was going to come out of the draft last year, and he didn't end up coming out. So I haven't watched him this season, so I actually don't know if he's improved or got worse or anything, but I did like his film last season, like pretty good athlete, downhill player. Looks like PFF has him ranked 110, so at least he seems like a middle round guy. I'll definitely check him out this year. I know Perkins is returning to LSU, and he tore his ACL. But we'll see. Definitely check him out again. What about using Eric Ezukanma? I think the Ezukanma train has left the station. Why didn't we resign AVG? Yeah, I would say that was his biggest free agent mistake, Grier's. Because honestly, if you look at this offseason, I don't think the draft or who they added in free agency was that bad, actually. I think it was one of Grier's better works for the most part. I think the biggest problem he made in this offseason was some of like him extending people that didn't need to be extended, because that put themselves in a tough spot with like Tyreek and Ramsey's contract, because like their contracts didn't need these extensions or like these move around money. Now it makes it harder to trade and move on from if they want to leave, I feel like he just gave out too many extensions like that, and it kind of put you in a tougher cap situation. And then obviously I think letting Van Ginkel go was the big one. And yeah, that's what comes off the top of my head at least. Just get rid of this one read QB, damn. What are you talking about? From 1 to 10, what's your panic level right now for the team overall? I'd say a solid, like, I'm in the middle, 5. I wouldn't, it just depends. I think obviously things can change so fast in the NFL. I don't tend to panic like hugely. It's not like, I don't think the Dolphins are in the worst situation, but I do think there is concern like, oh, this could easily go downhill and get worse. But I also could see them fixing it. So it's like, it just depends how I think they address free agency in the draft. I'm fine with. I don't think I love Malik Washington. I'm one of the biggest Malik Washington fans. I don't think he can play the Tyreek role, or at least I don't think you should rely on him to. Any chance we bring back Calais Campbell? I think that's all on Calais if he wants to play. My guess is no, but I guess it's not 0. Any thoughts on Cam Smith? Is that train gone as well? I think Cam's got another year, but it's looking like I would say we're getting close to it. He has also struggled to stay healthy. He's had more injury problems than probably anyone on the team, right? I don't think Cam is. I mean, hasn't stayed healthy really at all in the first 2 seasons. But who knows? Yeah, it doesn't look good though. But I think you give him another year because I think, as I've been saying, sometimes people give up on players too quickly. But if it doesn't work out, then you move on. See, we fucked ourselves signing Tua, shaking my head. Okay, so if we didn't sign Tua, what would you do? Will you let him walk this offseason? Because in my opinion, I actually don't think the Tua signing is that big of a deal. Because you're either gonna have Tua, like for the next 2 seasons, right? And if it wasn't working out, then in 2026 at the draft, after those 2 seasons, then you draft someone to play behind him, or potentially even take over for him, and then you move on from Tua. Because to me, I don't think it's that big of a deal because you weren't moving on from Tua this offseason anyways. And if you do move on from Tua this offseason, you were just going to get worse, right? Like there's no one this year we think is going to get better for us at quarterback position. But I don't know. Didn't Igbo have a good year for Washington? I know statistically he did, but I'm pretty sure he was getting burnt last game versus Dallas. I mean, I'm always rooting for Noah, but I think the numbers were a little misleading, but he definitely played better. It was definitely his best season for sure. Would you pay Phillips? Depends on what the price is. I'd let him play out his contract, though. Too many injuries. What would be your opinion to be our priority in number 13 pick in the draft? I'm just best player available. I think O-line is one of the biggest needs on the team, but I don't think there's likely to be an O-line at 13 that's going to be worth it. So I'm just going to best player available, either D tackle, safety, like any DBs really, D tackle, maybe even a linebacker if that's best player available. I don't know if that will be the case. Or maybe one of those tackle falls to you that can play guard and you go that direction. Or even going like a tight end like Tyler Warren. Could even go receiver at this point with no Tyreek. If one of them falls, that's unexpected. Igbo was decent. Igbo was serviceable. How many edge rushers do we need? I would say you need one most if you're probably gonna move on from Chubb, so you're gonna need like one like legit that's gonna like play a decent amount. The rest of the edges, you probably just need depth. Are you an Alabama fan? No. You're gonna need like one like consistent, like someone who's gonna play a decent amount. The rest you just need like depth players that are like, because you can bring back Quinn Bell, maybe Kamara steps up. Who knows? How much you offering Holland? Uh, not much. I don't know. I feel like he's gonna get way more than what I would ask him. So I don't feel like there's a point of offering much. Because you got to think, like, even though he had a bad season, there's too much film before that was good, and he's still like under the age of 25. Like, those guys don't reach free agency a lot. Like, someone's gonna pay him a lot of money, and I think it's just time to move on. I think it's safety is the one position like you're completely resetting at safety, in my opinion. Like, pretty much. What's up? What's up? So it's Chops, Phillips, new starter, and depth going forward at edge. Well, I would say Chop and Phillips would be like your starters, your two starters, and then a third guy who plays a heavy in the rotation, because I'm guessing they're going to let Chubb go because of just looking at his contract. And then I would say maybe another depth player that's not on the roster, but then maybe like Quinn Bell and Mohamed Kamara also fighting someone else that they added at the depth for those like final two spots. If Weaver leaves, who you like for that job? Yeah, probably just Saleh from Robert Saleh. He knows McDaniel. Was a good D coordinator in the Niners, and then for the Jets, like he wasn't the greatest head coach, but their defense was always good. So it just makes the most sense, like probably out of the options, you know? I'm just gonna ignore that because it doesn't answer my question. Right? Are you worried at all that Weaver gets poached? No, I don't think he will, personally. But yeah. And honestly, I know there's like the rule, right, where like if he left, I don't think they would get the comp picks. I think he has to be here 2 years for the comp picks, you know? Dotson is a free agent. I think all the linebackers are free agents pretty much, except Jordan Brooks. Brooks, they signed to a 3-year deal, so you have Brooks for another 2. But I would bring Dotson back, but he's not. I wouldn't bring him back to like guarantee him a starter, though. He would be a guy I'd bring back, be like, okay, let's still try to get a better starter, but I like him as a third guy. Because he was really bad in that Packers game, like really bad, like unplayably bad versus the Packers. But all the other games, he played pretty good. And then if you look at him in Seattle, like he had up and down moments. He's a good cover guy. Obviously came away with 3 interceptions. I do think he's a little bit limited versus the run, though. If you bring it up, could he move inside? Chubb could only really play inside on like passing situations. He can't be like an inside deep. He's not big enough to play inside on like run situations. Yeah, I think Dotson would be fairly cheap. I don't know. I don't know about Keenan or Mike. I think they're both kind of both injury prone and older in age. I don't know if that's the direction I would go. It's not a bad thinking. Like I like the direction you're heading in, but I don't know about those two specific players specifically. Just got your celibate rapid. Thanks for all your content. You were def up there for me in terms of sound reasonable coverage on this team. Hope one day we can have you analyze good football. Yeah, I appreciate that, Drew. Appreciate it. Hopefully one day. Hey, some games there's good football, but not a lot of them. I mean, I would say it's pretty even, but like one day we're gonna have like consistently good football. God, that's the dream. But who knows? It might get worse before it gets better. The Dolphins are at a point right now where like it could tilt in either direction. This offseason will be pretty important. The draft is so important this year, man. You finally have some picks, and the Dolphins do not have a lot of young players on this roster. Like, they don't really have a lot of young players to pay after this season, if you look at it. Like, because they had a couple drafts in a row where like they didn't really have anyone except other than Achane. Clone Jordan Brooks. Y'all want to Kate for BS 5 years almost there, but just not good enough? I'm not sure what you mean. I'm just talking about like a lot of different stuff. It's a lot more complicated than that, you know? Obviously, it's not good enough, and I agree that it needs to be better, but Dolphins are in that position at that, like the position you're talking about, specifically quarterback, to get better, so then you're trying to get better next year. And you're trying to get better around him, you know? Jack Besh. I'm a Jack Besh guy. You know, Jack Besh, if you guys haven't seen, that was the first video I posted for the draft. That's like, I posted some other ones for members. Like I have a Gunnar Helm and a Marcus Bow film breakdown out for members right now. And then Jack Besh I made available for everyone. And those other ones will become available eventually. But I'm gonna start making a lot of them. So keep an eye out for those. Yeah. Is there a solid wide receiver we could grab? Love Higgins or Godwin. Yeah, Higgins gonna be too expensive. Godwin's coming off a big injury. So is Diggs. That's the problem. A lot of the veteran free agents are like coming off injuries, and the only like really young one that's like a superstar is Higgins. And I don't think the Dolphins will be on that. Do we need a third back, assuming Mostert is gone? Yeah, I think running back is something they should add in this. Someone especially that's like could get short yardage. Honestly, even if they added like a workhorse that was like a starter, I wouldn't even be surprised if that happens, because I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, hey, Achane's a big time player. We don't want him to be our workhorse back. Like, he'll be a guy who we give touches to, but we also could just play him at receiver as well. And then we have a guy who's like a workhorse. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. I think that's something that's like low key that could happen. What round would you take a QB in draft, and which QB? Honestly, I'd probably take like Dylan Gabriel, the Oregon quarterback, on like day 3, because he fits the scheme. And I don't love a lot of like the high upside guys in this class. Like maybe they work out, maybe they don't. But like where you have to take them, I just feel like it's most likely a waste of the pick. And I would rather just in 2026, where it's a better class, wait a year and then go in that class if you really need a quarterback. And then I would sign a veteran guy this offseason to be your backup. Around, do you see Mullings going? I haven't watched Mullings yet. Wait, where does he play again? I've heard the name. Is he Michigan? Oh yeah, Michigan running back. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I haven't watched him yet. Running backs, I haven't really watched a ton of the running backs. Texas Tech like has Taj Brooks. He's intriguing. The running back class is actually pretty good though, from what I've seen. There's Scatabo, Genty at the top, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Hampton from North Carolina. Those are some good players. You don't see Jalen Wright as a workhorse? I mean, I guess that's someone they could try to get in that role. I didn't see enough this season to make me feel that's like what they're going to do though next season. And when I say workhorse, I don't necessarily mean like, I mean, they could bring workhorse, but like, I'm saying like more like, oh, we get this guy, you know, a bunch of, he would be your main running back. Well, then Achane would get a lot of touches too, but also he would get a lot of receiving work. And then Jalen Wright is mixing in and getting a decent amount of touches, as much as like 10. So it'd be like a nice rotation, but I meant it more so like you don't need to rely on Achane as a workhorse. Yeah, I think that a lot of the backs are pretty big in this class. Like even the backs who are like not known as like for being big backs are like pretty good size. Like there's not a lot of undersized backs in this class that are like at the top too. Like let me look at them. We got some halfbacks here. We got Genty, who's 5'9", but for 5'9", he's 215. Pretty solid size to him, you know. Armaro and Hampton is 6'1", 220. Scatabo is 5'11", 215. He's got like a nice build to him. Sampson from Tennessee is over 200 pounds. He's kind of on the smaller side, but he's 5'11", 201. Caleb Johnson, 6 foot 225, another bigger back. I like the Ohio State backs. I like Travion Henderson, and I like Junkins as well. Devin Neal's another solid player. Giddens from Kansas State's another pretty big back, 6'1", 212. A lot of there's not. I don't see like any sub 200 backs here. Yeah, Mullings is 6'2", 233. I haven't checked him out yet. But even like Martinez from Miami, 6 foot 230. Manana guy from Rutgers. This is the first back on this PF. I'm looking at just PFF's list. Marcus Yarns from Delaware. He's the first one under 200 pounds. But everyone else is over 200. Like Taj Brooks, who I mentioned, is 5'10", 230. Ollie Gordon, 6'2", 225. Like everyone's pretty good sized in this class. Like that Michigan D tackle, Kenneth Grant. Yeah, I think Kenneth Grant's in play for the Dolphins for sure. Yeah, I just read his name too. I haven't watched him either. I haven't started with the running backs really yet. I've been more so going through like receivers, DBs, because those are my favorite positions to watch, and then I've been doing like O-line, D-line, because those are big needs for the Dolphins. I mean, Dolphins have needs everywhere, so I'm definitely going to get to every position because they're all kind of needs. Does McDaniel need to rethink guard position completely? Yeah, that's like the biggest thing in this offseason is kind of just changing up like their philosophy a bit. It doesn't need to be like a complete change, but I think at O-line specifically, there needs to be a change in philosophy, specifically guard. There needs to be more of like a run Grady thing. And the reason I think this could happen is if you look at all the other Shanahan systems, almost all of them have just gotten bigger at guard. Like every season, they just get more size at the guard position. And then they have an athletic center, which the Dolphins have, and then some athletic tackles. They have some guys that can move, and then in that guard, you don't ask them to be the big movers. You ask them to move other people, So hopefully that works out. Draft Warren, let him run it on short yards. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, he literally runs Wildcat for them. I would not be opposed to Warren at 13. I have Warren as a first-round graded player in this draft, and I only have 13 first-round grades, so I really like the tight end class as a whole, and I think Warren's one that would fit really well because he would be a red zone threat, which is big. He can do some of those stuff that I'm talking about, but he can also be a Y inline tight end and help in the blocking scheme. Like I think he needs some work with his technique consistency, but he clearly has the size, physicality, and mentality to be a good blocker. Like he plays with toughness. Yeah, like Warren, Gunnar Helm, those are guys who I think would fit well with Jonnu. I think Mason Taylor, LSU, also in that conversation. Then there's guys like Terrence Ferguson a little bit later. Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech. If you want like a later round tight end and you want someone who's not going to catch anything for you, he's just like a 6 offensive lineman. That guy might be the best blocker in the class at tight end. Those are the types of tight ends you would be looking for. But yeah, Warren's one of my guys. Like I have on my list here, I have my, what's it called, pulled up? Like I have a Google sheet, and I might share it eventually once I've like filled it out more, but I have like notes on players, and then I have like highlighted in like aqua, like guys I really like, especially for the Dolphins. Like I have Gunnar Helm highlighted, Tyler Warren, Mason Taylor at tight end. At DB, I got Starks, Watts, Barron. I need to figure out how to say his last name, but Andrew Mukaba from Texas. Those are some of my highlighted guys. At receiver, I have like Jack Besh, Amika Ibuka. I don't think he's like the exact type of receiver I'm looking for the Dolphins, but I think he'd be like a perfect fit in the Dolphins scheme. But yeah. That would be a pick that wouldn't surprise me if that happened for the Dolphins. Amika Ibuka. What draft picks can we realistically get for a Tyreek trade? Honestly, with like considering contract and age, like I don't know if it's going to be that high. Like it wouldn't be surprised me if it was just like a 3rd rounder or something like that. Like I could see it being a 2nd rounder. I could see it even being less than a 3rd rounder. But I was thinking day 2 somewhere, potentially. But I don't think it's going to be better than that. Maybe they get like, a 3rd and a 5th, or just a 2nd straight up, something like that. I was thinking that range, just if you consider contract and you look at other receivers in that range, but who knows? It depends how much contract they're willing to take on. Because if they take more of the contract, then that lowers probably what pick you'd get. Milam, yeah. I like Milam in the second. If they need a guard. Milam's one of the few guys I have a scouting report on, actually. I don't have it on this computer right now, but yeah. Because I wrote a scouting report for this other place. But yeah, that was I'm gonna do so tomorrow. I don't know. I'm not gonna do any film breakdowns on this most previous game because the season's over, and I kind of like honestly I gave up on the game pretty quickly because the Chiefs pretty much lost the game instantly. So like I wasn't that mad when they were losing. I was like, okay, it is what it is. Like this changes nothing, you know. So I'm gonna do a film breakdowns on like the full season. I think tomorrow I'm just gonna have like a highlight video come out of Chop Robinson's full season. I'm not gonna do film breakdown, but just Chop's full season highlights as a rookie, and then I'll probably do some more highlights on other rookies as the weeks go on. But yeah, I'm gonna start doing full season breakdowns. I'm gonna do draft film breakdowns. I already have some on the go, like Gunnar Helm, Marcus Bow. I'm gonna get to players like Tyler Warren, Mason Taylor, some of the other guys I've talked about. Leave me some in my comments, leave me some suggestions, and I'll see if I can get to those players as well for the draft. And then I'm gonna do some streams this week, starting like draft streams. Like we'll talk about who I think the best option is at 13. We'll go through positions, things like that. So. Ryder, what players do you see as prime candidates for restructures for cap space, and what are the implications down the road? Oh man, I'd have to look into it. I'm not the best cap person. I kind of just go to other people for that. I know like there's some people who have a better understanding of it, and then I read it and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But I'm pretty sure it's a lot of them. I know it might be players like Tua, like a sealer type situation. I think those are like names I've seen. I think they probably would cut. I think Chubb, from my understanding, they do post June 1st. Would save the most money. And then I don't know what else. I guess it would depend on if Tyreek and Armstead are leaving, and then what's going on with Ramsey, that type of thing. But honestly, I know the season's over and it sucks, but honestly, draft season is just as exciting to me as the actual season because I'm a big draft person. So really the most boring part of the season for me is like post-draft, waiting for the actual like season to start. What are you saying at the end of the videos with that little voice? Oh, I just say, yeah, Kyle Krabs has a lot of the good, I think he has like all it like laid out for you if you want to understand the, what's it called? The restructure stuff. What are you saying at the end? I say, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. But I say it in like a high voice. Yeah, I'll look into it and see exactly what it is, but I'm guessing just based on the Dolphins situation and knowing Grier and McDaniel, like they're gonna probably go all in, so they will probably restructure everyone that they can that needs to be restructured. Because to be fair, they don't have a lot of big contracts they need to re-sign. Like last year, they had to re-sign a lot of people, and they already gave out a bunch of contract extensions last year. The only like big name re-signed would be Holland, and I think they let Holland go. Everyone else will be really cheap, so all the restructure would be just to bring in other people. Peace. Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys. I will be posting and streaming more. Definitely streaming more. Draft is when I usually like to stream, so we can just talk draft prospects. I'm gonna be watching a lot more films, so I can get some sleeper names that people maybe don't know about, and I can have like notes on everyone.